You want to give me like a 10-second countdown? Can't see the clock anymore.
15 seconds. (6:30).
Good evening. I'm calling the Wednesday, March 24th, 2021 Economic Development Commission meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. Tonight's Economic Development Commission meeting will be held virtually by using Zoom due to the local state of emergency for the COVID-19 pandemic. Commission members and staff will participate in this meeting via telephone and video conference. As chair, I will be leading the Economic Development Commission meeting, and the public is welcome to participate when invited throughout the meeting. Members of the public may attend the meeting by joining via online Zoom. If attendees experience any audio problems, we suggest you leave the meeting and then rejoin. This has usually fixed the issue. Additional instructions on how to participate are posted online at www.burnsvillemn.gov in the public meeting calendar. As usual, tonight's meeting is available for viewing on BCTV and on the city's website. You may participate in the meeting tonight online by going to https://zoom.us/join and typing in the meeting ID number 975-8252-8579. Once you're logged into the meeting, please use the chat feature to tell the moderator which item you wish to speak to. You may also call into the meeting at 651-372-8299 and enter the meeting ID number 975-8252-8579. And with that, now on to the agenda. The first item on tonight's agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Do members of the commission have any changes to the agenda? Not seeing any. Staff, do you have any changes to the agenda?
None from staff.
All right, I'm looking for a motion.
I motion to approve the agenda.
And a
I
second.
second the emotion or the motion.
So I got a motion by Folkstead and a second by Fitchett to approve the adoption of the agenda. Beth, can I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Newman,
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Folkstead,
Aye.
Commissioner Fitchett,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmitz. Aye.
Looks like the motion carries, and we're on to agenda item number 2, approval of the January 27th, 2021 Economic Development Commission meeting minutes. Do members of the commission have any changes to these minutes? I am not seeing anything. Staff, do you have any changes to the minutes?
None from staff.
All right, thank you, staff. So we'll be looking for a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
I motion to approve.
I second.
Got a motion by Fitchett, second by Anderson to approve the January 27th, 2021 Economic Development Commission meeting minutes. Beth, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Newman.
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Folkstead,
Aye.
Commissioner Fitchett,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmitz. Aye.
And the motion carries. So now we move on to agenda item number 2, recommend approval for Capstone Quadrangle request for TIF number 7 assistance for soil remediation in the Minnesota River Quadrant. So Regina Dean will provide a presentation of this item and an overview of the background report. So Regina, I return it over to you and the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Chair, members of the commission. Hang on just a minute. One of our commissioners is trying to get into the meeting. Looks like he's contacted communication, so hopefully they'll be able to reach out to him. So I'll go ahead and get started. This specific request is for TIF in an established TIF district. TIF number 7 was created some time ago through special legislation for soil corrections within our Minnesota River Quadrant. So Minnesota River Quadrant, as many of you are familiar with from previous updates and just your longevity with the city in a commission role or as residents, is located west of 35W and north of 13, just south of the Minnesota River. The particular sites that are of interest are owned by the Asselford family properties. They own a number of contiguous properties. The particular developer is interested in developing 5 of those properties highlighted on the map shown in the slide. There is a little triangle piece of property that the developer is in negotiations with the property owner to the, I would say, the northeast. But just the majority of the property is within the Asselford owned properties. There has been previous soil corrections within those properties. However, the soils corrections were done on small building pads individual to each of those properties. So it has not, the entire property has not been cleaned up, in other words, just portions. Next slide, please. So the developer would like to build 2 116,000 square foot buildings with clear heights of approximately 32 feet in height across what is now established as property lines and within the area that needs soils correction, soils cleanup, environmental remediation, and there's a large utility line that cuts through the property. In order to construct on the property, a lot has to happen in order to make this really usable land for development. So we were approached by the developer almost a year ago, actually, in some early conversations. And recently, in January, we brought this to City Council work session to see if there would be support for using tax increment financing for this particular property, and also to see if there would be support for the city applying for a series of grants to help fill any gap associated with development and on this property. So at that council work session, very positive feedback from the council to go ahead and work with the developer. There was consensus. All 5 council members were supportive of the idea of using TIF for the property, saw that there was a need, saw that there was a large gap in order to really make this a level playing field for the developer. So again, 2 116,000 square foot buildings, brand new, really a use and a need that we see is in total alignment with the Minnesota River Quadrant conceptual plans that we have in our comprehensive plan update, and some of those inquiries that we received from the development community of wanting that high ceiling type of office warehouse that we don't have a lot of in Burnsville. Felt that this was going to be a really good fit if everything could fold together. Next slide, please. This is a conceptual graphic showing how the office warehouse could look. Again, that really high ceiling, kind of your modern office warehouse design. Next slide, please. And to get more into the details about the needs. So whenever an applicant is asking for TIF, some of the things that we look at are, could this development happen without the use of assistance? If it needs assistance, you need to show the need, but there's extraordinary cost. And so in the slide, you can see, and there's more detail in your background in the memo that's provided by Allers, our financial consultant, that yes, there are extraordinary costs and this project would not move forward but for the use of city assistance. There's about a $3.5 million gap to kind of level that playing field again. TIF specifically would generate for these properties a little over $1.7 million. So we have about half that gap that we have to, or that we are willing to partner with the developer in seeking those grants to help close that gap. Next slide, please.
Before you go ahead, Regina, I think Al had his hand up. Al, do you have a question or a comment you wanted to share? You're on mute there, Al.
Did I hit it? There we go. There, you say utility line. There are a number of utility lines. Is it just the sewer that has to be rerouted, or are there other utilities that need to be rerouted?
It's Commissioner Anderson. It's just a sewer line that runs, I would say, through the middle of the property that needs to be relocated. There is obviously cost associated with that. The proposed building would, as shown, cross that utility. And so from a building code standpoint, from an access standpoint, that needs to move. So that's part of the request. I should note that, and I didn't at the beginning of the presentation, but we do have Mike Faber with the development entity here to answer any questions, as well as Jason with Ellers to help answer any technical questions if those arise specific to the economic development tools that we're proposing to move forward. So we do have our economic development tools policy that has recently been, I'd say, modified and recently adopted by our city council and the EDA. And we use this as a guiding document when we're looking at any proposal that deals with either business subsidy, assistance, TIF, things like that. And really there's some goals that we're trying to meet and want to be in alignment with. And through review of the application and the documents, we do feel like this is in alignment with the policy. It will provide an increase in tax base, increase in job potential, really takes care of a contaminated and challenging site, and hopefully will be a catalyst for other development within the area, certainly a challenging area. And the concept from what we've seen appears to meet our architectural standards. We do in that policy have a better or best architectural standard requirement for projects that are seeking city assistance, and it does appear to meet that requirement. We are recommending that that's included within the contract, and then also a job wage goal to align with the increased job potential goal within the policy. Now, you may have seen in your background, there is a term sheet. I'd like to refer to that as more of a guiding document to start that conversation, which will ultimately lead to the requirements that will be in the agreement. So it's, I'd say, a draft, non-binding parameters. Next slide, please. So the next steps, if the commission recommends approval, would be a step at the Economic Development Authority, a public hearing, and then development of that agreement and contract related to TIF. And we would work behind the scenes with the developer and with our EDA attorney to develop that. And then staff, we continue to apply for grants. You may have seen listed in the background a series of grants that we're planning on applying for. We have already applied for a deed redevelopment grant. That application has been submitted. It's under review and we're awaiting the results for that. There's a number of other grants like TBRA, deed cleanup. The county has a couple of grants that we're hoping to seek funding through. We also did receive direction from our city council to look at the environmental legacy grant fund that Dakota County has specific to Burnsville and use that as a last resort to assist if needed. So we're gonna, at the direction of council, go for as many grants as we can in partnership with the developer to help again close that gap. And then with the specific application or proposal that you saw before you in the site plan, those actions do also require some land use action. So if TIF is approved and that gap can be closed, the developer will shortly apply for their development application and go through that land use process. But before they do that, they want to make sure that they have all the funding lined up and the ability to move forward. And with that, let's see here, next slide, please. With that, staff does recommend that the EDC recommend approval to the ADA and that the EDA approve the subsequent contract between the Burnsville EDA and Capstone Quadrangle. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Like I said, we have someone from Ellers and Mike Faber, the developer, here to help answer any questions.
Go ahead, Jeff.
So I have a question. I was looking at this, and first of all, I think the project is great. It's very exciting for an area of Burnsville that's needed new product for a while and is ready for that. The industrial market is extremely strong right now. As I look at the overall cost of $117 a foot, when I look at some of the buildings that we have priced of late, that number doesn't surprise me, quite honestly. And then I look at the additional extraordinary costs for the remediation and so forth. And I'm a big, I'm a believer in TIF when there's extraordinary costs, whether it's tearing down a building that puts you at an unfair advantage or soil correction like we're talking about here. But I'm struggling a little bit to understand, and this is probably a question for the developer. There's contaminated soils of $960,000 for correction, but then there's also soil correction for $1.5 million. And to me, there would naturally be some soil correction that would take place that wouldn't be above and beyond. Can you differentiate that for me? Because I'm confused by that.
Yes, Commissioner Mike Faber with Capstone Quadrangle. That's a good question. To give you the answer, I have to somewhat step back in time. This area was originally essentially marshland before it was developed initially. And the site was filled starting back in apparently the 1960s when it was first created as an industrial park. But back then, the techniques that people used to fill the sites was really not monitored very carefully. They didn't have today's standards. And so this has really very significant, I would use more gruff language if it wasn't a public forum, but it's really, really crappy soils. There's almost no soil support for being able to hold up buildings, let alone parking lots and semi-trucks. And so bedrock in this area is down around 25 feet below grade. We hope we don't have to go all the way down to bedrock. We've done very significant geotechnical and environmental exploration on the site. Some of the things we found on the site, our consultants from Braun discovered methane gas. And so that's a pretty significant problem because it's well above the lower explosive limit, meaning while we're constructing the site, we have to be very careful that we don't have things that'll cause sparks. Normally, those things can occur from decomposing peat and natural materials, organic materials. It can also happen because of fill material. In this case, Braun's environmental engineers have told us and documented, we've spent already about $80,000 of environmental investigation on the site, going well beyond even just a phase 2 environmental search, that much of the fill material was demolition material, apparently from an old power plant that was demolished in the 50s or 60s and contains a lot of wood timber products. And so that wood is decomposing and giving off this methane. And we can't possibly make economic sense. It'd probably be $8 million if we tried to remove all of that material. So the sensible solution is to put in this vapor mitigation system. The vapor is harmless if it just comes up through landscaping areas, but hard surfaces prevent it from coming up. And in Minnesota weather, in the winter, the frozen ground tries to make that methane go up in the path of least resistance, which the MPCA believes is the building footprint, because the building is heated in the winter. And so the path of that methane to come up and come through the concrete floor is too great. And it would cause two problems. One, potentially make the occupants, the tenants in my buildings, sick. Can't have that. And two, create a risk of an explosion. So a pretty time-tested method is that they put in this system to collect the methane and exhaust it out through the roof of the building with powered fans that create a negative pressure and suck it up before it can penetrate into the building. And there's testing that's required periodically to make sure the system is working correctly. In addition to that, the poor soils that you referenced that are non-environmental are really just the work to pull out the unsuitable material and either haul it off. We're going to try to save money by keeping the non-contaminated soil on site and build berms with it at the north end of the DuPont Avenue end of the site, where we have this enormous power line. But we also, if we don't have enough good soils that we can clean out of the bad soils, whether it's geotechnically bad or environmentally bad, obviously the environmentally bad stuff has to be taken to approved landfills depending on the nature of the contamination. But we may have to, and probably will have to, spend money to bring in suitable engineered soils to get enough grade to fill back in where the bad stuff gets taken out. That non-environmental stuff is what adds up to the $1,507,000. And the instructions I gave to my construction contractor was, you can't double count. Anything we would have incurred for normal construction of a building, if this was a perfectly clean and nice stable soils site, then that doesn't go into these numbers. I need these extraordinary costs strictly to be what is necessary only for excavating the bad stuff and getting a suitable building pad for these two buildings. So for example, we're going to have a silt fence around the site and a construction trailer for the 2 to 3 months it takes to correct the site. But I would have incurred those costs anyway to just build a normal building. So those costs are not in these numbers. Sorry.
Well, no. I mean, again, the project, just to get that area going and all the work that you're having to do is wonderful. And I'm really excited about that. I'm just, my concern is, the normal grading that you're going to have to do per your reference, Mike, where is that at? Where is that accounted for? Is that accounted for in the extraordinary cost, or is that accounted in the total project cost? And if so, where is that accounted for?
It's in the hard construction cost of the building. It's not in the extraordinary costs. The normal grading is in my normal breakdown from my contractor for the construct the building costs. So for example, grading to get suitable slopes. Lady Bird is about 20 feet higher than DuPont.
Yeah.
The land naturally slopes down that way, but the building pads have to be level. These are, as industrial buildings, you got to have a flat floor the entire length of the building, right? And the same with the truck court. And because we have icy weather in the winter, you don't want any slopes to exceed about 5%, or semi trucks can get in trouble because they're so heavy and they hit some ice. That's a problem. So those normal excavation costs are in the hard construction cost, part of the $23 million and change that is my normal construction cost. And that's perhaps an opportunity for me to say, in a way, I really appreciate that the city's willing to consider helping this site, helping me get this site to be buildable. I don't view it as public assistance for my development of this site as industrial buildings. I view it as help to get the site to a normal level playing field that a normal development can be built on.
And I really appreciate that because I agree with that. It's, to me, the tool of TIF should be to take care of these incremental costs that put you at an unfair advantage. But to the extent that they're being used to drive normal costs, it also puts you at an unfair advantage. And so I'm just saying, of these costs that have been shared, and Ms. Dean, I go back to you or Ellers, has somebody taken a look and working with Mike to make sure we understand what the normal soil corrections are so we can see that line item detail so there's clarity around that? That's really my question, because again, I think the project's very, very exciting. What you're doing is wonderful, and there's a huge need for high ceiling height, high clear height space in Burnsville, so I'm excited about it.
I will answer your question and let Regina or Jason jump in, but I volunteered to share my pro forma showing all of these numbers, which my contractor has bid out to all of the trade subcontractors. I shared that. Jason spent time with me walking through all the details of my pro forma.
Thank you.
Chair, Commissioners Anderson and Fichette both would like to speak.
Yep, I saw Al's hand up first. I'll go to Al first.
It looks like there's some significant drainage easements as well as the sewer line easement. Are there actual sewer lines in there, or is it just easements that have to be changed to build the buildings?
Yeah, it's actually both. There are some existing easements, Commissioner, that don't have any sewer pipe in them. And by sewer pipe, in this case, the only sewer pipe we're talking about that has to be relocated is a stormwater pipe system.
Yes.
There's a north-south pipe, and then there's an east-west pipe that runs through the north building out to Lady Bird, and it's sort of T-shaped. Those have to be abandoned and relocated, and our plan is to take the sewer pipe from the south end where it starts to penetrate in and wrap around the north end of these buildings towards DuPont, and then come back down and tie in where they already go.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. I was just looking at the other drainage easements under the buildings that there's nothing there that has to be removed other than the sewer line.
The sewer line won't actually be removed. It'll be disconnected, filled with sand, and abandoned in place. It's about 25 feet down.
Okay.
That's low enough, and when we fill it with sand, it won't cause any problems. But we will need those easements that are dashed in under the footprint of the buildings to be vacated.
And if I may add, just part of the land use process that's anticipated, assuming this goes through, we'll all take care of those details.
The other question that I had is the timeline seems to be fairly aggressive. And I'm assuming that if you can't meet that some of the TIF would go away. Is that the case because of the expiration of the TIF in 37, I think it was?
By not meeting the timetable, do you mean when we complete the construction of the buildings?
I think in the term, it says when you can get a certificate of occupancy, that's when the period would start for the TIF. And if that would extend out a year or two, you would lose some of the TIF if I'm reading this right.
Well, I certainly don't expect it to take an extra year or two to finish construction of the buildings. If I start on time.
Okay.
I guess that's my risk, but maybe Jason can answer that better.
Sure, Commissioners, Jason Arsvold with Ellers. So it is correct that the clock essentially is already ticking on this district. The receipt of first increment was in 2019. So that every year that there isn't development here, we lose another year of increment. So that would be correct. Although Mike anticipates, getting to work right away on it, and then we'll have increment in this district through 2039.
Crystal, I'll go to you.
Thank you. My question is in two parts, so it might be a question for Regina and then also the developer. First question I had was, I did read that there would be two employees that would have access. In excess, I thought it was 200, at 200% for, let me read that right, state minimum wage. And I'm wondering if there would be more opportunity for more employees based upon what the facility will establish. And then the second question I had is, I just want to confirm the TIF is refundable, right? So that would be paid back over a period of time. And I'm just wondering if there was any more opportunity for any more projects to be built in that TIF area. And if so, well, I'll just leave it right there. I think it kind of speaks for itself.
Regina, I guess I can answer the first one, and maybe Regina can help me out with here. But in our development tools policy, there is anything that requires a grant or an application requires at least a minimum of 2 jobs that are at a level of 200%. So it's not only 2 jobs at this facility, just 2 jobs have to be created at least at the 200%, and then anything else is fine. I don't know if Regina, it helped out.
So, I mean, it's very, very possible that you'll have over that 2 jobs that will be established in these buildings. So we technically, because it's a soils correction district, we don't have, according to state statute, we don't have to establish any jobs. But because it's a goal of the policy, we wanted to have at least a minimum threshold. And we've discussed this with the developer, and it seems very attainable to have, just that very minimum 2. We have other projects where we've had a minimum of 25 jobs or 45 jobs at X dollar. And that's because they've been tied to a different type of TIF district where there is a job requirement per state statute. So it's not a requirement, it's an ask, and an ask according to our, more in line with our policy, so that we're following those goals. And the developers express, they're building the building. They anticipate that they will lease out the space to other people, and likely what will happen is there will be something within the lease agreements that will spell that out to kind of tie them to those very, I would say, very minimal job requirements. And then other question, did you want to handle that one, Jason?
Sure, yeah. So TIF district number 7 is the district that we're talking about here. And there are parts, so it is geographically larger than just the area that we're talking about. So there is the potential that other projects in the district could come forward. But again, as I mentioned, the clock is ticking on that. So the longer those projects wait, the less increment will be available to assist with those projects. And you can kind of see the dynamic that we have here, where increment available even now is really only half of what this particular site needs. So it just will become more challenging as we go forward on other sites.
Mike. The developer, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I would add just a minor comment to what both Regina and Jason have answered that question with. My personal expectation is there will be way more than 2 jobs here. I'm not the employer. I'm hoping to land tenants in the building. And as Regina explained, I'm investing money in building the buildings. I know that buildings this size won't just be an adjunct warehouse for somebody. That's why if you look at the site plan, you'll see there's a lot of auto parking spaces. We don't know whether it'll be manufacturing and it'll be 80 or 100 employees, or whether it'll be distribution and with 10 or 20 or 50 employees. There's just no way to tell until I get my marketing materials together and close on the land and start trying to find tenants. And to the second point, it's my expectation that building some Class A, modern, state-of-the-art industrial buildings with a great location that has access to 35W, that's, in my opinion, the primary north-south route up through the Twin Cities, as well as Highway 13 east-west. So we've got access points at 2 interchange, full 4-way interchanges, and one of them is about to get an upgrade with a roundabout. It'll be a powerful message. If we succeed, these other landowners around us in this old industrial park, my guess is they will say, hey, our site's more valuable than we've been thinking, to have some outside storage of construction materials or whatever. And other parcels in the vicinity may likely try to upgrade and look at our success and say, hey, let's sell this to a good developer and let's do this too. Get a lot more value for our site. So maybe we'll hopefully be the enzyme that helps trigger the whole area to raise up.
Brady?
I agree. I like the project. I think it's well needed in Burnsville. I think it's a great location for it. Those are great things. One thing that I do have a question about, though, is on our economic development policy, specifically as it relates to TIF. I know there was a lot of discussion previously about using TIF for so-called speculative projects. And I was wondering, did we amend the policy to allow for speculative projects to go forward, or is that no longer part of the policy? How does that work?
So Regina, I can maybe take, I think, as I recall, and I can pull it up here too, but that was a topic of discussion when the policy was created. My recollection is that particular provision didn't make it in the policy, particularly for reasons like we're discussing right now. I think there was some healthy discussion and debate around, well, what if you have a redevelopment site? And, like this is effectively a redevelopment site, and you're looking to populate it with speculative buildings exactly like we are right now. And I think for reasons like that, I believe it was omitted from the policy, but we can double check.
Yeah, I think we should, because I believe when we discussed it, it was also discussed that we had never done them before, and then it was immediately pointed out that we have done speculative.
Is better than mine on that.
So if we can somebody review that, so we can make sure that conforms.
The last TIF we approved was a speculative TIF in the other quadrant on the other side of the freeway, and there wasn't a problem at that point in time.
I think you're talking about TIF 9.
I think what happened was we discussed the potential conflict with TIF 9 after TIF 9 was approved. That's why the discussion may have come up.
Timing of that is right. I think we approved that before having the discussion.
I'm doing a quick search on the tools.
Yeah.
I can see anything.
I have it up as well, and I'm not seeing anything in there about a prohibition against speculative buildings.
Okay, I mean, I couldn't find it, but I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't just my inability to find it as well.
No, but you're right. We did have that good discussion about that, and that's probably why you're remembering that.
And there was a TIF approved previously about, I think 4 years ago now, that did require the developer to have a tenant in hand before they could get the TIF money, and they did not get a tenant. I don't know if that was because of their financial, situation or something like that, but there was one that was approved that required that.
I know we gave TIF money to the project that would be just to the east of this project across 35W, and that's a speculative building as well.
Also earlier today, when I was reading about the TIF funding, this development met at least 3 different criteria in the policy to receive funding. And I know that one of the biggest ones was to be able to develop that land so it's buildable. And then it was, offering jobs, and I can't remember a third one, but he did hit like 3 of the strongest criteria in the policy. But the biggest one being able to build on that land was one of the TIF dollars was definitely used to do that.
Are there any other questions? Looks like Laura's raising her hand now.
Forgive my inexperience on this, because I think this is one of the first conversations that I'm getting into on this issue. Are there any sort of guidelines or recommendations or ways that we look out for if the new building usage is going to do any concerning changes in expected traffic? I mean, if we're building a state-of-the-art facility based on drawing businesses that would utilize semis and dockings in the back, is 13 in good shape to manage that kind of traffic? Are we expecting potential tenants to change our traffic expectations?
I think that's a planning commission and zoning
Okay.
commission type of an issue. They'd probably handle that one.
Perfect. Thank you.
And just, if I may add, just from a cursory review, we have had some discussion with the developer, and their development team have had some discussion with our engineering team and our planning team, fire, building, to have some of those preliminary conversations. But as Brady said, those things are looked at by the planning commission.
All right, I think, Crystal, do you still have your hand up, or?
Yes, I was able to find the criteria, and if it's okay, I can just there's a few bullets I just wanted to read off if it would help us be able to make a decision tonight. If anyone is okay, I'll just read off those bullets if that's all right to do.
Sure, go for it.
So the TIF funding is to increase and preserve the tax base, provide employment opportunities, to provide help to acquire, construct public facilities, helps to redevelop or renew blighted areas, helps provide access to services or finances, or provides for public infrastructure, finance or provide for public infrastructure, phase in a property tax increase on the parcel resulting from an increase of 50% or more in 1 year on the estimated value of the parcel, other than an increase due to improvement of that parcel. So he really does hit, you know what, I'm sorry, I just read tax abatement. That's
I'll
not
take it.
that, but some of those criteria are synonymous with the TIF funding.
Thanks, Crystal. Yeah, I think this is a great project. Having a Class A building down there is much needed for this area. I drive this area a lot, and it's good to see someone come in there and put a building up. And warehousing is becoming a hot commodity, especially in kind of where we're at in the current situation with the COVID pandemic and things shifting to the online market, if that's what kind of fills this gap, or even other warehousing kind of tenants. So it's good to see that Mike and your team is coming in here to develop a building, and starting in a TIF district. TIF 7 district has already been established, so hopefully this kind of spurs some more development in that area that is much needed. So I think this is a great project. I also agree with the city council that looking at all the grants before we dip into any ELF fund is the way to go, and if we need to get down to ELF, kind of subsidize the rest. I think that's a worthy conversation as well from the city council. So from my standpoint, I think this is a great project. It's great to have something come into this in this location that's been much needed for a long time. I guess I see your hand up now.
My question is probably for Regina. How long do you think it'll take before you hear about all the grants that you're working on applying for? Will it be in time to meet the schedule that they have for construction?
So we expect to hear back any day now from DEED on the redevelopment grant. A couple of the other grants have a May 1st deadline that we'll be seeking. And then some of the other grants have more of a rolling, like due date type of grant term established. So long answer for yes. And working with the developer and the developer schedule, yes, we do believe that we will meet timing.
A little bit tricky, but we should make it work.
All right, with that, any other remaining questions from the commission?
I just had a statement.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Was that staff recommended that we move this forward. So having said that, I recommend we move it forward.
All right, so I got a motion to approve by Commissioner Fitchett. Anyone want to second that? Are we have further comments, discussion?
I'll second it.
All right, so we got a motion by Fitchett, second by Anderson to approve the Capstone Quadrangle for TIF number 7, assistance for soil remediation in the Minnesota River Quadrant. Beth, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Newman,
Aye.
Commissioner Folkstad,
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmitz,
Aye.
Commissioner Fichette,
Aye.
Commissioner LaFave.
Aye.
Motion carries. I'd like to thank Mike and Jason for joining us tonight. Good luck with this project. Any other parting words you'd like to say, Mike?
Yes, there are lots of great sites of land in healthy economic areas, but some of them are located in communities that are just impossible to deal with. And every developer knows that as soon as they get involved and try to pursue a piece of land, it's a lot of brain damage that may end up in a lot of tears. I have to just tell you folks that dealing with your staff and consultant has been a real pleasure. And, it's for us, we can tackle difficult sites, but it really helps when everybody's in the boat rowing in the same direction. And that's what it feels like, a very welcoming thing from Burnsville. So we really like this project a lot. We're going to work hard to make it successful. And thanks for being a great community.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Have a good rest of your meeting.
And with that, we'll move on to agenda item number 4, the Economic Development Strategic Plan update. So Regina will provide a presentation of this item and overview of the background report. So Regina, I'll give you back the floor.
Great, thank you. Next slide, please. So this is just our, I was gonna say annual check-in, but our every meeting we check in on the strategic plan and just kind of see where we're doing every 3 months or so. And so this is your update for this particular meeting. So item number 1, ensure sustainability of the Burnsville Center Shopping Center and County Road 42 corridor. So I believe the EDC was in attendance when we had the Burnsville Center property owners invited to a meeting with our city council at their work session. And so Cohan Retail Group, who recently purchased, I'd say about 50% of the Burnsville Center, the mall proper area, and some of the parking field and buildings in front. They were in attendance, as well as representation from Seritage was also in attendance, and had some discussion about plans in the future, and just it was really just an opportunity for us to kind of put a face to the name, or name to the face, and learn a little bit more, welcome them to Burnsville as well. if you haven't watched it, I encourage you to take a look and watch that particular city council meeting. And then we are in the midst of a alternative urban area-wide review process that actually has officially kicked off as of last Tuesday. So the area does encompass the entire area outlined by yellow. And this is a tool, it's an environmental tool to use to look at what environmental type impacts there may be in this area and any mitigation that might be required. Typically, when a development project of a very large scale comes in, an EAW is required. And so the city felt that that would maybe an impediment to time for a developer to come in and have to go through that process. As an alternative through the state, you can go through what's called this AUAR and look at a larger scale area and look at development scenarios for the entire area. Now you do have to update this every 5 years, but we do see this as a way to kind of knock down some barriers for development. We really want to make this area shovel ready, and this is one of the tools to help do that. So we do have a website that's live on our city webpage. You can go to that, provide comment. We'll have a couple of outreach and open house opportunities for people to provide some impact specific to this process. And then Guy's Flavortown Kitchen is operating out of Buca de Beppo. We were one of the first, I think, in the nation, one of two in Minnesota. I think there's more now, but there's a Guy Fieri restaurant operating out of Buca. So I thought that was kind of cool. It's kind of a trend right now where restaurants are operating out of other restaurants or maybe even closed restaurants to offer food through delivery to their customers. So something kind of fun to highlight. Buca's still alive and up and running, so you've got that option still going too. Next slide, please. Improve the image of Independent School District 191 in the city. Still participate in quarterly meetings with the school district, the chamber, and experience Burnsville. So we have just a continuing dialogue with all those groups. We had our last meeting in March, beginning of March. And then we did, which I'll highlight later, we have a staycation and a date night promo. And one of the things we did for both of those was highlight some of the community education classes that the school district has. It looks like I had a question regarding the AUAR and what that cost was. I believe it was around $70,000 for the contract for the AUAR. We did receive a grant through Dakota County, a RIG grant for, I believe it was $15,000 to help assist with that. Next slide, please. Continued development within heart of the city. The Orange Line still under construction. You may have noticed the frontage road, Travelers Trail near I-35W and Burnsville Parkway was closed. That was for sidewalk improvements. It was closed, I think, last week and will be closed for another week or so, maybe more. But construction still underway. They're still on target for end of 2021 grand opening. So keep looking out for that to be moving along. And then we have a 172 unit mixed use apartment that's just under construction. So you'll probably see some fencing around and some bulldozers kind of moving around right now, moving dirt, preparing for this mixed use building. So this was actually approved back in, I want to say 2017. But there was a lawsuit with the neighboring property owner and the city So that was obviously put on pause till that was figured out, and now the developer is moving forward and is in for permit right now. Next slide. Enhance and build awareness around our city programs as relates to housing and commercial. We have our community development department has signed a contract with the Center for Energy and the Environment, and we will be marketing. Make sure you pick up your next Burnsville bulletin and keep an eye on our website and social media for opportunities to have an energy audit done on your home. We will be matching part of that expense to bring down the that price for our residents to have an energy audit done on their homes. So just something people can do, take advantage of, and hopefully have some long-term energy savings for their homes. That'll be, like I said, kicking off very soon as we just signed the contract. And then, like there's another question. Commissioner Anderson has a question regarding pedestrian traffic between the bus stations and new apartment buildings. I believe that comes up in discussion as far as, are there safe crossings? Are there sidewalks? That's something that our engineering department will typically look at. As far as more in depth from that, I'm not sure. And then Grow Minnesota visits, we continue our partnership with the Burnsville Chamber of Commerce and have done 2 or 3 this year. And we'll just continue throughout the year visiting with our different businesses and learning about any challenges, opportunities that they have, as well as filling out a very specified survey that's provided by the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. Next slide, please. And then continue the city's position as a regional destination. We did have a staycation promo that started at the beginning of the month that continues through the end of March. Encouraging people to use their spring break and stay here in Burnsville and take advantage of the really fun things that we have going on, kind of those hidden gems that might be out there, and trying to bring those up to your attention. We've done some cross promotion with Experience Burnsville on that. And then we've done cross promotion of the Bite of Burnsville as well. That's a passport program where there's a coupon book to visit different restaurants and different businesses within Burnsville. So I believe that goes through the end of the month too. With that, certainly if there's any more questions, I'm more than happy to answer. That's your update for the meeting.
Any comments from the commission here? Oh, I think Alice has your hand up there.
Yeah, I would have to say that the city has done a much better job of promoting all the activities that are going on. I noticed on Nextdoor, there's lots of comments about the kids programming for the summer. And anything you can do in the social media realm, it looks like Nextdoor has gotten to be much bigger than it was even 6 months ago. So it might be a place that you want to consider putting more of your promos out there, because it does affect a lot of people.
I would pass that along to our communications department. I know some government agencies do have specified accounts. I think Dakota County, for example, has one, but that's something that I'll pass along to our communications department.
Jeff?
I was going to say, good comment, Commissioner Anderson, but I was also going to say the energy program that you have put in place, that partnership was wonderful. but I don't want us to let the foot off the gas there on that whole thing to about bringing programs to help our residents revitalize houses or buildings that need to be revitalized, because that's still there. We've been talking about it for a while. We haven't made a lot of progress on that. So I think that is important that we try to make some progress on that at a little bit faster pace than we have to date. So just a thought on that. Are we going to have time, Chair Newman, for additional new thoughts, or would that be later, or could I introduce a new thought on something?
Yeah, I mean, you can introduce a new thought here. The next thing is just update, so there isn't really anything further from here.
I just wanted to pass a new thought that I ran across recently in another city that I thought was a good idea. I mentioned this to the Public Policy Committee for the Chamber as well. And that community, have you heard of park-a-lots? Have you heard that term?
Yes, within the public right-of-way and parking spaces, or?
Yeah, so this was a city that was going to take parking spaces in front of some of the restaurants that don't have an outdoor seating area. And they were going to allow them to shut those parking spots down and secure those areas. It was on the business to secure those areas, but then to be able to put tables in that outside to expand their business during the summer period. I thought that was a really great idea. So I just throw it out there as a possible thought for us.
I think actually action was taken recently. We do allow that currently. Do we know how long that's allowable? Did that provision that the city council passed last year have some sunset on it, or is that going to continue?
So we have specifically for like our commercial districts, you can expand your patio area within your parking space. So a lot of times you'll see these kind of more parklets or patio areas. A lot of times it's in like public right-of-way or public parking spaces like street parking. And we don't have a lot of that in Burnsville other than in heart of the city. Where it's more your traditional on-street parking. And so we certainly allow it on private property. We allow people to kind of expand out now to have a patio. And then I'd say on occasion, you'll see it in heart of the city more for like special events though.
Additionally, to expand on that, our city manager did issue an order last May, allowing for temporary outdoor customer service areas. So perhaps this could also be considered within that use, and it will continue indefinitely until it's repealed by a subsequent order or until termination of the state of emergency.
So Jeff, are you recommending that maybe we move that to not a state of emergency type situation, but a permanent?
Well, that's a good question. I think certainly a lot of places do not have outdoor patio areas. And I certainly think that to the extent that we can accommodate that, I think it'd be a great thing for a lot of these restaurants to be able to expand their businesses permanently. And truth is, in the summer months when it's nice in Minnesota, there's no better place than the summers in Minnesota, right? So who wants to sit inside a restaurant anyway? And so I think it warrants some long-term discussion.
I think if she originally gave that order, I guess you'd call it, back in May, we've got almost a year's worth of data. If we haven't had any problems with it, maybe we should just move that forward.
And
so to that point, I'm sorry, Ms. Dean, but maybe to that point, we should gather some information from the city and just see how it has gone to date and bring some of that information back before we make any kind of recommendation.
I think just generally speaking, as you all may or may not be aware, the city is in the process of, we're going to kick off a city code update. So looking at the entire city code, but then also looking at the zoning and our subdivision sections separately. And so we're looking for feedback from the public. We'll be looking for feedback, obviously, from our planning commission, who will be heavily involved, but as it pertains to, I can foresee us, as it was in the work plan, coming to the EDC for feedback on some of these items that are more business related. for ideas on how to be more flexible, how to be more cool, how to be more kind of up to date with today's times, how to relax some of these standards, but still be a high quality community. So we're going to be looking for that feedback as well. So, you know, as these ideas are coming, whether you want to share them with the rest of the commission in time, or you just want to either feed that to me, or I'm sure there's going to be a public portal for that. Bring it on.
See several hands up here. Crystal, do you have a comment?
Yes, thank you for recognizing. I just wanted to ask a quick question referencing the Economic Development Strategic Plan update. And I'm just wondering, do we know what national brochure is going to be looking at the old space for TJ Maxx? Is there any information you can share on that?
It hasn't been formally disclosed to city staff. I could say if you Google the name that was spelled out in on the architectural elevations, Mendel, that may give you some clues.
All right, Al, you had your hand up. Oh, Al, did you have a comment?
No, I think it was still raised from
Oh, raised
before.
up. All right, thanks, Al. Anything else from the commission here on the strategic plan update? All right, yeah, this was just informational and discussion purposes, so no motion is required on this piece. With that, we'll move on to agenda item number 5, which is updates. Only updates I have here is that the City Council will be hosting the Urban Land Institute panel discussion on March 30th at 5:30 p.m. and the EDC is invited to participate in the discussion. I don't know if you have any other comments you want to make for city staff on that piece.
If as the EDC, if you're able to attend, I think it'd be a really great discussion. There's going to be a panelist of a Urban Land Institute volunteers from various backgrounds, anything from kind of retail marketing strategies to office warehouse development, an apartment developer, architect kind of background. I think it'll be interesting discussion. They'll be looking at not only the Burnsville Center area or Center Village, but then also looking at things like office. You know, office today isn't used the same way as it was 10, 20 years ago. So what are they seeing? What are some visions? What are things that are, being discussed by developers, by the commercial development world, banking industry? It's if you're not familiar with Urban Land Institute, it's a really great cross-section of different disciplines, anyone from engineers, architects, planners, bankers, lenders, mortgage people, yeah, just kind of engineers, everything in between. I think it's a really kind of cool organization that kind of crosses a lot of those sectors. So encourage you to attend if you can.
Thanks, Regina. And the other item here for updates is the next EDC meeting is scheduled for May 12th, 2021. City staff, is there any other updates you want to share with the EDC at the moment?
We have a new community development assistant, Kevin Truzinski, that started on Monday. So as Beth starts to transition to her new role, you'll see Kevin as well at these meetings, taking minutes and being our recording secretary, and then Beth will start to bring projects forward. So you'll see more of Beth kind of in her new role as that training transition happens, and probably a lot more communication from Kevin as it relates to kind of those administrative type roles.
Awesome, great news. All right, I don't think there is any other updates. So, and with that, there's no other further action items to come before us tonight, and looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
To adjourn.
Oh, what, do you have something, Jeff? Oh,
Just
second.
second, but I think Commissioner Fichette beat me.
Yep, so I think I got a motion by Anderson, a second by Fichette to adjourn. Beth, can we have-
You can do Jeff. I think I was on there last week trying to jump off. So
All right, well, whatever happens, Anderson or LaFavor. Beth, can we have a roll call vote to adjourn?
Commissioner Newman,
Aye.
Commissioner Folkstad,
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmitz,
Aye.
Commissioner LaFave,
Aye.
Commissioner Fichette.
aye.
All right, and the motion carries. Another wonderful EDC meeting tonight. With that, thanks for tuning in. Everyone have a good night.
Thank you.
Time.